Man, this woman was different. She went from singing soft love songs in the 1950s to building an empire that changed music forever. Sylvia Robinson, the voice behind Love is Strange, the soul of Pillow Talk, and the mind that gave the world rappers delight. That's wild, right? She wasn't just in the room when history was made, she made the room. Long before hip-hop hit MTV, Sylvia and her husband Joe Robinson turned a tiny New Jersey label into the heartbeat of a global movement. But fame came with secrets, money came with betrayal, and success came with a heavy price. You think you know the story of hip-hop? You don't, not without her. Let's get into the Sylvia Robinson story right now. Let me know where you're watching this from in the comments. Grab yourself a warm drink, maybe a cup of water or tea, sit back, and let's start this journey together. Sylvia Vanterpool was born on the 29th of May, 1935, in Harlem, New York, the cultural heartbeat of Black America. The Great Depression had ended, but for a lot of folks in Harlem, life was still a grind. Her parents were immigrants from the Virgin Islands, working hard just to keep the lights on. Sylvia grew up surrounded by gospel choirs, corner doo-wop groups, and that New York hustle that either breaks you or makes you stronger. And man, Sylvia, she was born to make it. She wasn't one of those kids who waited for permission to dream. By the time she hit her teens, she was already sneaking into local talent shows, performing with that mix of sweetness and fire that would later define her career. People remember her voice as soft but commanding like velvet with an edge. She taught herself guitar, studied the way singers moved crowds, and soaked in everything around her. The jazz clubs on Lenox Avenue, the record stores on 125th Street, the sound of Billie Holiday on late-night radio, that was her classroom. In 1950, at just 14, Sylvia got her first break singing under the name Little Sylvia with Columbia Records. Can you imagine that? 14 and already recording for a major label. Most teenagers were thinking about dances or school crushes. She was thinking about stage lights and microphones. But the business wasn't easy, especially for a young Black girl trying to be taken seriously in a male-dominated world. She learned early that talent alone wasn't enough. You had to fight for your place, even when no one believed in you. Then came Mickey Baker, one of the hottest guitarists in the New York session scene. When the two met in the mid-1950s, something clicked instantly. Mickey saw in Sylvia what a lot of producers missed: raw, natural star power. Together, they formed the duo Mickey and Sylvia, and the chemistry was electric. They blended rhythm and blues with a fresh twist that felt new, young, and bold. They'd rehearse in tiny studios with peeling paint and bad acoustics, chasing that one perfect take. In 1956, lightning struck. Their song Love is Strange hit the airwaves, and it was a smash. That guitar riff, iconic. That back-and-forth conversation, "Baby? Yes? You know I love you?" instantly became one of the most recognizable moments in rock and roll history. The record sold over 1 million copies, and suddenly this Harlem girl with big dreams was on national TV, touring, and hearing her voice blast out of jukeboxes across America. For a young Black woman in that era, that was huge. She had broken into spaces that were rarely open to women like her. But fame wasn't all glitter. The music industry in the 1950 and early 1960 was ruthless. Contracts were shady, managers took their cut, and artists often saw pennies for their hits. Mickey and Sylvia's partnership started to strain. Mickey wanted to focus on teaching guitar. Sylvia wanted to build something bigger. She wasn't content just being the talent. She wanted to own the sound, the studio, the label. That mindset right there would later make her one of the most important women in music history. By the early 1960s, Sylvia married Joe Robinson, a businessman from Harlem who shared her ambition. Together, they dreamed of creating a label where Black artists could have control, a rare idea at the time. But before she could reinvent herself as a producer, Sylvia stepped back from performing. She wanted to raise her family and figure out what came next. The stage lights dimmed for a while, but that spark inside her never went out. Even during that quiet period, Sylvia stayed close to the music. She'd visit studios, listen to new sounds, soul, funk, gospel, and study how records were made. She watched men run entire empires and thought, why not me? That question would define the rest of her life. She was about to switch from being in front of the microphone to being the one who owned it. From the smoky clubs of Harlem to the birth of rhythm and blues, Sylvia Robinson's early life was a masterclass in resilience. She had tasted fame, felt the sting of the business, and learned every lesson the hard way. And man, those lessons, they would pay off big time. Because when she came back in the 1970s, she didn't just want to sing, she wanted to run the show. By the late 1960s, Sylvia Robinson was done playing by other people's rules. She had already lived a whole career, a hit record, a stage partnership, a name in the business, but she wasn't satisfied. The spotlight didn't excite her anymore. Ownership did. She wanted to be the one pressing records, signing artists, building something that couldn't be taken away. And with her husband, Joe Robinson, that dream started to take shape. In 1968, Sylvia and Joe founded All Platinum Records in Englewood, New Jersey. Now, when people think record label, they picture shiny offices and a big staff. Nah, man, this was straight up homemade. Their studio was literally in a converted house. Joe handled the business side, and Sylvia handled the sound. She was behind the board, mixing tracks, coaching singers, picking takes. It was rare enough to see a woman in the studio back then, but a black woman running the entire session? That was unheard of. At All Platinum, Sylvia became a one-woman powerhouse. She wrote, arranged, produced, and even engineered. She could hear things others missed, a bass line that needed to groove harder, a harmony that had to hit just right. The label's first breakout act was The Moments, a smooth soul group whose single, Love on a Two-Way Street, hit #1 on the R&B charts in 1970. Sylvia co-wrote and produced that record. Think about that, a woman producing a chart-topping soul hit at a time when very few even knew what a female producer looked like. From there, the label started signing local acts. Linda Jones, The Whatnots, Brother to Brother. They didn't have big budgets or fancy connections, but Sylvia had something: stronger ears and instinct. She could hear a hit before anyone else did. Artists described her as tough but fair, passionate but precise. She'd say things like, "Sing it again, but this time, mean it." She didn't just record music, she captured emotion. And man, that little New Jersey label started to make noise. DJs up and down the East Coast were spinning All Platinum records. Sylvia was building a quiet empire, but make no mistake, she was still hustling. There were nights she slept in the studio, chasing the perfect mix. The industry didn't hand her a seat at the table, so she built her own damn table. But even as All Platinum grew, Sylvia felt something stirring. Producing other people's hits was rewarding, sure, but she missed performing that rush of connecting with an audience. And there was one song she couldn't get out of her head. A track she'd written for Al Green that he turned down because it was too sexy. So Sylvia decided to record it herself. That decision, that bold, fearless move, would change her life again. Because the next record she made would redefine not just her career, but the sound of an entire decade. So here's where things get wild, man. In 1973, Sylvia Robinson stepped back into the booth, not as a producer this time, but as the artist. She had this song, Pillow Talk, that she originally wrote for Al Green, but Al passed on it, saying it was a little too sensual for his gospel-tinged image. Sylvia laughed it off and said, "Fine, I'll sing it myself." And when she did, she made history. Pillow Talk was sultry, bold, and way ahead of its time. Those breathy moans, the soft synths, the slow groove, it was practically a masterclass in how to make a record sound intimate without being explicit. And remember, this was the early 1970 mainstream radio wasn't ready for that kind of sensuality, especially from a black woman in her late 30s. But Sylvia didn't care. She was confident, she was grown, and she was in control. When that song hit the airwaves, listeners went crazy. It climbed to #1 on the R&B chart and #3 on the Billboard Hot 100. She even earned a gold record for it. What made Pillow Talk special wasn't just the song, it was the energy behind it. Sylvia wasn't trying to fit into the industry's mold. She was reinventing it. At a time when most female singers were told what to wear, how to sing, and what to say, Sylvia wrote her own lyrics, produced her own sound, and told her own story. She was saying, "Yeah, I can be sensual and still be the boss." That attitude, that mix of confidence and control, became her trademark. After the success of Pillow Talk, Sylvia didn't slow down. She followed up with singles like Sweet Stuff and Private Performance, proving she wasn't a one-hit comeback. But the thing about Sylvia, she was always thinking bigger. While everyone else was chasing disco trends, she was already watching what was bubbling up on the streets. She'd visit block parties, small clubs, and hear DJs looping funk breaks, kids rapping over beats. Something was happening out there, something raw, something new. By the mid-1970, all platinum was still running, but Sylvia knew it needed evolution. She saw how music was shifting, funk was getting harder, lyrics were getting sharper, and people wanted stories that felt real. She once said, "The streets always tell you where the music's going, you just gotta listen." And man, she listened better than anyone. What's crazy is that Pillow Talk was more than just a hit record, it was a statement of independence. It showed the world that Sylvia Robinson could be the voice, the producer, and the business mind, all in one. It broke the line between artist and executive, between femininity and power. And in doing so, it set her up for the next chapter one that would shake the entire music world. Because just a few years later, that same woman who whispered her way to the top would drop a record that talked the whole world into a brand new sound. The sound of hip-hop. By 1979, the music world was changing fast. Disco was fading, funk was evolving, and in the Bronx, something raw and electric was bubbling. At block parties and community centers, DJs were looping drum breaks from James Brown records while MCs rhymed over the beat. It wasn't on the radio yet. It wasn't on vinyl. But it had that energy, man, that feeling of something brand new. And Sylvia Robinson felt it in her bones. One night, she went to a party in Harlem and saw a crowd losing their minds as a DJ mixed records back and forth while a guy on the mic freestyled over it. It hit her instantly. This right here, this could be a record. Nobody in the industry thought you could record that kind of music. Executives laughed it off. "You can't put street rhyming on wax," they said. But Sylvia? She wasn't listening to them. She was listening to the people. When she got back to New Jersey, she told Joe, "I'm gonna make a rap record." Joe thought she was crazy. But that's the thing about visionaries, they see what others don't. So Sylvia started hunting for talent. Through her son Joey Jr., she found 3 young guys from Englewood, Wonder Mike, Big Bank Hank, and Master G. They weren't famous, they weren't signed. But they had rhythm, charisma, and that Bronx-inspired style that Sylvia knew would work. They called themselves the Sugar Hill Gang, and when they walked into Sylvia's studio, none of them had ever even been inside a professional recording booth. Sylvia sat them down and said, "Just do what you do at the party, but keep the beat steady." The beat, of course, came from Chic's Good Times, a groove that defined the summer of 1979. Sylvia had her house band replay it live because she wanted that clean, organic feel. Then she told the boys to rap one long, continuous take. And man, when they started spitting, "I said a hip-hop, the hippie to the hip-hop," Sylvia knew instantly she had something special. It was fresh, it was catchy, and it was fun. She took the acetate straight to the radio, and the phones blew up. DJs couldn't believe it. Listeners couldn't get enough. Within weeks, Rapper's Delight was everywhere, blasting from car radios, roller rinks, and block parties across the country. It climbed the charts, sold over 14 million copies worldwide, and became the first commercially successful hip-hop song in history. What's wild is that Sylvia produced it entirely on instinct. There was no blueprint, no guidebook, just her gut telling her this new sound could connect the streets to the mainstream. And she was right. Rapper's Delight didn't just make history. It made hip-hop a business. Suddenly, record labels, journalists, and music fans had to take rap seriously. In just a few months, Sylvia Robinson, a woman who had once sung love songs and produced silky soul hits, had officially launched a cultural revolution from a house in New Jersey. Think about that. While the rest of the world debated whether rap was even music, Sylvia was already pressing vinyl, printing labels, and cutting distribution deals. She wasn't following the wave, she was creating it. She called her new label Sugar Hill Records, named after the Harlem neighborhood that represented elegance, pride, and creativity in black culture. And through it, Sylvia would build the first empire of hip-hop. But as we all know, every empire has its wars. And for Sylvia, success came with new battles, power struggles, money fights, and a storm that was only beginning to brew. After Rapper's Delight exploded, Sylvia Robinson became the hottest name in the game, though most people didn't even realize it was her running the show. While radio DJs shouted out the Sugar Hill Gang, Sylvia was back in that Englewood studio, plotting her next move. She wasn't about to let hip-hop be a one-hit wonder. She wanted to prove this wasn't just a fad, it was a movement. The success of Rapper's Delight gave her leverage. Money started flowing in, distribution deals expanded, and suddenly the big labels that laughed at her idea wanted meetings. But Sylvia wasn't interested in partnerships. She wanted independence. She wanted ownership. So she doubled down, investing everything she had into growing Sugar Hill Records into a full-scale operation. She built a team of engineers, musicians, and street scouts who searched the Bronx, Harlem, and Newark for new talent. Sylvia didn't need charts to tell her what was hot. She had the streets feeding her directly. And then came the moment that solidified Sugar Hill's legacy forever. In 1982, Sylvia teamed up with a young group from the South Bronx, Grandmaster Flash, and the Furious Five. These guys were already legends in the Park Jam circuit. Flash was a genius on the turntables, and Mel had a voice that could cut through anything. Sylvia knew they had the power to take rap to another level, but she wanted a record that went deeper than just party rhymes. She wanted something with a message. One night, she brought Mel a rough idea, a socially conscious song that talked about poverty, struggle, and urban decay. The result was The Message. It was gritty, haunting, and real, a total shift from the playful energy of Rapper's Delight. When Mel rapped, "Don't push me 'cause I'm close to the edge," you could feel the tension of the city in every word. Sylvia produced the track herself, layering those electronic synths and echoing beats that gave it that cold, metallic sound. It was like the streets of New York translated into music. When The Message dropped, it changed everything. Critics who once dismissed rap as a novelty suddenly called it the voice of a generation. Rolling Stone, Billboard, and even mainstream newspapers started writing about hip-hop's cultural power. Sylvia Robinson, once seen as an outsider, was now being called the mother of hip-hop. She didn't just make hits, she made history. But here's the thing, man, while the hits kept coming, so did the pressure. Running an independent label wasn't easy. Sylvia was producing, managing, promoting, and financing all at once. Sugar Hill's roster grew with artists like The Sequence, the first all-female rap group, Funky 4+1, and Crash Crew. They were touring, selling records, and bringing hip-hop to audiences that had never even seen a rapper before. Sylvia was literally building the industry brick by brick. Inside the studio, she demanded perfection. She was known for her sharp ear and fierce leadership. Artists respected her, but also feared her. She could be tough, emotional, even unpredictable. But that's what it took to survive in a business that wasn't built for women, especially not black women. She carried the entire label on her back, and somehow, she kept the hits coming. By the early 1980s, Sugar Hill Records had become the blueprint for every rap label that followed from Def Jam to Bad Boy. Sylvia had proven that hip-hop could make money, move culture, and stand toe-to-toe with pop, rock, or soul. But behind the gold records and headlines, cracks were starting to show. Money disputes, power struggles, and industry envy began to circle around her. Success had made her a queen, but even queens have enemies. As Sugar Hill Records rose higher, the storm clouds started rolling in. Fame and money have a way of changing everything, especially in an industry where trust is rare. By the mid-1980s, Sylvia Robinson's empire looked unstoppable from the outside. Gold records on the wall, radio hits on repeat, artists touring worldwide. But behind closed doors, things were getting messy. Contracts were unclear, royalties weren't always paid on time, and resentment began to boil. Some of her biggest artists, the same people who helped build the label, started speaking out. Members of the Sugar Hill Gang, Grandmaster Flash, and others claimed Sylvia and Joe Robinson had cheated them out of their money. They said they were promised one thing and got another. For fans who had seen Sylvia as the mother of hip-hop, it was hard to swallow. But for people inside the business, it wasn't surprising. That's just how the game worked back then. Record labels, big and small, often kept the books tight and the artists hungry. Still, when it's your heroes calling foul, the backlash hits different. Reporters began sniffing around. Lawsuits started piling up. Artists wanted out of their contracts. Sylvia tried to defend herself, saying she had invested everything into building the label, paying for studio time, distribution, and marketing. She insisted she wasn't robbing anyone, she was keeping the business alive in a cutthroat world. And to be fair, she wasn't wrong about how rough it was. Independent labels had to hustle twice as hard to get half the recognition. But perception is everything, and public opinion started turning against her. You'd hear stories in industry circles. Some said Sylvia ruled with an iron fist. Others said she was being taken advantage of by shady distributors. Either way, the narrative started slipping out of her hands. The same woman who gave hip-hop its first hit was now being painted as the villain. It was wild. Man, the cycle of music history repeating itself. Just like so many pioneers before her, Sylvia was both celebrated and blamed for the very system she helped create. At the same time, competition was heating up. New labels like Def Jam, Profile, and Tommy Boy were signing fresh acts, bringing in street-level credibility and better distribution deals. MTV started breaking rap videos, and suddenly the genre Sylvia helped launch was exploding without her. She was still the queen, but the throne was shaking. What made it even harder was that Sylvia took things personally. She saw her artists like family, and family turning on you hurts the worst. There were arguments, tears, even physical fights in the office. Some of her former collaborators accused her of manipulation. Others quietly admitted that she just played the same tough game the industry had always played. Only this time, it was a woman holding the cards. Through it all, Sylvia kept her poker face. She didn't beg for sympathy or try to rewrite the story. She just kept grinding, trying to hold the label together as the lawsuits, debts, and betrayals piled up. But the foundation was cracking, and she knew it. The storm wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning to break. By the mid-1980s, the empire that Sylvia Robinson built with her bare hands was starting to crumble. What once looked like an unstoppable dynasty was now a house full of cracks. Lawsuits drained money, distribution deals fell apart, and key artists walked away. Hip-hop, the sound she had helped introduce to the world, was moving forward without her. The industry she once dominated was now being redefined by younger, hungrier players. And for the first time in decades, Sylvia found herself on the outside looking in. Sugar Hill Records had been family-run, and when business troubles hit, it tore that family apart. Joe Robinson tried to steady the ship, but the stress was enormous. Bills piled up, radio play declined, and their relationship with MCA, one of their major distributors, turned into a legal nightmare. By 1986, Sugar Hill's offices in Englewood felt more like a ghost town than the vibrant hub it had been just a few years earlier. Equipment was being repossessed, employees were quitting, and the energy that once filled those rooms was gone. Sylvia tried to fight back. She believed Sugar Hill could bounce back if she just found the next big hit. She kept signing new acts, experimenting with early drum machines and electronic beats, trying to tap into the new wave of sound that was taking over New York. But the game had changed. The labels she once inspired, Def Jam, Priority, Profile, now had major label backing, slicker production, and new faces like Run D, MC, and LL Cool J leading the charge. Sylvia's old-school soul approach couldn't keep up with the speed of this new corporate hip-hop world. Then, tragedy struck. In 2000, her husband Joe Robinson passed away. For Sylvia, it wasn't just the loss of her partner, it was the final link to the empire they built together. She had spent most of her life balancing love and business, and now both had collapsed. People who knew her said she became quieter, more reflective, but never bitter. She still loved music. Even in the 1990s, she occasionally showed up in studios, advising her sons, Joey Jr. and Leland, who tried to keep the Sugar Hill legacy alive. But she knew the golden years were gone. Health problems began to creep in too. Decades of stress, late nights, and emotional battles took their toll. Sylvia suffered from heart issues, and though she kept her struggles private, those close to her saw the exhaustion in her eyes. Yet, even through the pain, she carried herself with grace. She had lived multiple lives, singer, producer, mogul, and she knew she'd changed the course of music history, whether people gave her credit or not. The saddest part? By the time hip-hop became a billion-dollar global phenomenon, the woman who helped start it was no longer part of the story. Her label was gone, her money was thin, and her name was fading from mainstream memory. It's a cruel twist. The very world she created had outgrown her. But those who really knew the game, the DJs, the historians, the fans from back in the day, they never forgot. Sylvia Robinson passed away in 2011 at the age of 76. No flashy farewell, no industry tribute special. Just a quiet goodbye from the woman who changed everything. The same way she entered the scene on her own terms. When the story of hip-hop is told today, you'll hear the names of DJs, MCs, and producers who shaped the culture, but real ones know. It all traces back to a woman named Sylvia Robinson. Even after her death, her fingerprints are everywhere. Every time a rapper signs their own label deal, every time a woman takes the reins as a producer, every time an artist turns street music into a global empire, that's Sylvia's legacy breathing through the culture. She proved that vision mattered more than validation. Before Russell Simmons built Def Jam, before Puff Daddy turned Bad Boy into a powerhouse, Sylvia had already done it. She took a small, family-run label and turned it into the launchpad for an entire genre. And she did it without corporate backing, without big budgets, just pure instinct and determination. She saw possibilities where others saw chaos. Artists who came after her often spoke about her influence. Missy Elliott, Queen Latifah, and Salt and Pepper all benefited from the Doors. Sylvia opened a woman owning her art, controlling her business, and rewriting what success could look like for black women in music. Even male moguls followed her blueprint. When you look at how artists today build brands around their sound, that's the Sugar Hill model. Sylvia showed that a label could be both streetwise and profitable, that hip-hop wasn't just a sound, it was a movement. Her reach went beyond hip-hop, too. Songs like Pillow Talk became templates for R&B sensuality, inspiring generations of artists to embrace vulnerability and confidence at the same time. Producers in the 1980 and 1990 cited her work as an early influence on the fusion of soul, funk, and electronic sounds. She didn't just predict trends, she created them, and the industry followed. And slowly, history began to give her the respect she always deserved. Music historians started calling her the first female hip-hop mogul. Documentaries and interviews revisited her story, shedding light on how much she risked and how much she changed. Her name began to pop up again in tributes, museum exhibits, and hip-hop anniversaries. The same fans who once danced to Rapper's Delight were now telling their kids, that was Sylvia's idea. Still, even with all that recognition, she remains underrated, the quiet architect behind a revolution. She didn't ask for statues or fame. What she built was bigger than that, a legacy of innovation, courage, and self-belief that still echoes in every beat, every rhyme, every empire born from hip-hop's soul. After Sylvia Robinson passed away in 2011, tributes poured in from every corner of the music world, from old-school legends to new generation artists who might not have known her personally but lived in the world she built. Radio DJs replayed Rapper's Delight and The Message on loop, and longtime fans flooded comment sections with love, saying things like, without Sylvia, there'd be no hip-hop. It wasn't hype, it was the truth. But here's the thing, while the culture crowned her the mother of hip-hop, Sylvia herself preferred something else. Back in the early 1980s, she released a track called It's Good to Be the Queen, where she rapped, I'm Sylvia. That's the name rappin' Queen's my claim to fame. She didn't want to be remembered as a caretaker. She wanted to be recognized as a ruler. That's powerful, man. A black woman in her 40s calling herself the queen of a brand new genre? That was audacity, and it was beautiful. In the years since her death, Sylvia's legacy has only grown stronger. Hip-hop scholars now include her in the same breath as pioneers like Kool Herc and Grandmaster Flash. The Grammy Museum, the Smithsonian, and countless documentaries have started to highlight her role not just as a producer, but as the visionary who turned street rhymes into a global business. She didn't just catch the wave, she built the surfboard. Her influence lives on through her family, too. Her sons, Joey Jr. and Leland Robinson, have worked to preserve Sugar Hill's legacy, keeping her catalog alive and telling her story to new audiences. Younger fans who discover her through documentaries or sample-heavy tracks are often shocked to realize that one woman was behind so many firsts. The first major rap single, one of the earliest rap labels, and one of the first female-run music empires. And yet, there's still this bittersweet feeling when people talk about Sylvia. She got respect, but not nearly enough flowers while she was here. No star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, no major Lifetime Achievement Award. But maybe that's fitting for someone who always operated from the shadows, letting her work speak louder than her name. Today, when you hear an artist rap about building an empire, owning their masters, or breaking barriers that's Sylvia's spirit living on, the queen of hip-hop might have left the stage, but her rhythm still runs through the heart of the culture. She didn't just change music, she changed what power looked like. So here's the question, man. After everything Sylvia Robinson did, how should we remember her? Was she a hustler who played the game too hard, or a hero who had to fight twice as tough just to survive it? Maybe she was both. That's the beauty and the pain of her story. She didn't fit neatly into one box. She could sing like an angel, negotiate like a shark, and run a studio like a general. And through it all, she carried herself like someone who knew she was rewriting history even if the world didn't see it yet. You hear the stories about the money, the contracts, the business drama. Yeah, that's all part of it. But you can't talk about hip-hop, soul, or even modern R&B without tracing it back to her fingerprints. She broke every rule written for women in the industry and then built her own playbook from scratch. When people said no, she found a way to turn that no into a hit record. Sylvia's story forces us to think deeper about what success really means. Is it about fame, money, or legacy? Because if it's about legacy, she already won. Without her, maybe hip-hop still finds a way to happen eventually. Sure. But would it have happened then? Would it have sounded that way? Would it have reached the world so fast? Probably not. She was the connector between the old soul era and the new hip-hop movement, between the stage and the control room, between art and business. Every generation of artists since has walked across a bridge that she built, even if they don't know her name. So yeah, ask again, hustler or hero? The answer doesn't really matter. What matters is that she changed the game. She didn't just start a sound, she started a revolution, and she made it look easy.